So please let us know where you're coming from the world. And as you are putting that in, we'd love to know what the weather's like where you are, but not the weather outside. We'd like to know in an emoji how uncertain you are feeling. What is the uncertainty weather like where you are coming from? Put it in their chat in the form of emoji. Let's see what we get.
Okay, we've got some good ones coming
Start
in.
this right up front, upside down.
This is actually going to help me like build the skills of interpreting emojis. Like I usually have to go to my son and say, what exactly does this emoji mean? Yeah, I think I'm getting it. There's a lot of like stunned eyes, crazy faces, like verge of tears, tongues hanging out, gritting teeth, furrowed brows, like sorrow, crestfallen kinds of big streams of tears. I'm not sure what the purple devil really is. So Sean, you're gonna have to float me on that one. Yeah, we've got like melting faces.
Well, here's what we're gonna do. This is it's the range right now, isn't it? I'm just gonna share to kind of tee us up the two challenges that we're going to tackle today, and then we'll spend the rest of the time going through. We actually have prepared 14 practices. 13 practices that we have on these very ugly cards that Liz has created. We're going to go through each of these practices, and so we want to get through all of them, but we first want to frame up what is this conversation about. Challenge one. So thank you, Crystal F, for sharing this challenge with us. Here it is. Oops, sorry about that. I keep turning on my speakers. We're going through a workplace reorganization where the School of Medicine is centralizing options for the departments. Operations, sorry. How do you keep people calm when you don't even know how things will work? I think the plan is still forming, but it doesn't calm everyone's nerves. Okay, this is
Sean,
challenging.
I just read this one and it made me kind of get twisted up inside. Like I started, like, I don't know, I felt like my organs started tightening up, my throat starts tightening. I feel like I have been in this situation so many times. I think there's a lot of people in this situation. So I'm excited to dig into that. I know we're not going to do it now, but like this one made me feel nervous.
Yeah. Well, let's do more nerves. Here we go. Okay, challenge two. I work on the finance side in a healthcare company. The current political environment is such that, and we can talk about what's happening today, that tens of millions of dollars in payments could be reduced in the near future, representing 5 to 10% of our revenues. How do you prepare for such possibilities without causing panic in the workforce related to something that may not occur?
Yeah, something that may or may not occur.
And what were you telling me today? Today just happened today. What was it?
I think we just announced, it was breaking news that the U.S. government announced a layoff akin to 10,000 people in the health services department. Like that's a really big number of people, and that creates a tremendous amount of certainty, of course, for those 10,000 people, their families, those that depend on them, but also for people who are receiving those services. How is that going to affect our household? Also, people running those organizations, how are we going to carry forward without that? Like, to me, it just seemed kind of emblematic of so much of the uncertainty that people are facing.
Yeah, well, let's jump into it. So where do we start on this, Liz? What are the, well, how do we size up the principles that underline leading in an uncertain environment?
Well, I think the first thing we want to do is just maybe get our arms around what are the challenges of leading in uncertainty. We're going to chat that in, like, what challenges does it pose for the managers of those organizations where you're dealing with situations like the two that Sean just articulated? What challenges does it pose for leaders? So in some ways we're going to drill in, like, instead of like, what is the emoji, the emotion, like how does it make your job as leader harder?
Mm-hmm.
And, certainly leading in good times is a great job, but leading in times of uncertainty, that's a hard job, but it's also a really, really important job, which is why I'm excited for us to have this conversation, because leading in this environment kind of sucks. It's really difficult. It's difficult operating in this environment. Incidentally, we should let everyone know we're going to take this topic of leading in uncertainty. We think it's so prevalent, so important that we're going to break it into two parts. This first session, Leadership Matters, episode 15, is going to be about leading in uncertainty. The next episode, we're going to take just how do you navigate, how do you do your own work, and how do you make decisions and make, good moves in times of uncertainty. We're going to draw on some of the research from impact players. Lauren will be joining us for that. She's going to bring in some outside research. So right now it's all about the leadership issues.
And before we jump in, there's one thought that I had when you were talking, and that's this idea that, man, leaders make a big difference in our lives, but they make a really big difference when we're in a scenario where we're not sure we can trust the ground under our feet.
Right, because we don't want to go it alone. When times are good, I think the natural inclination is like, who needs a boss? I don't need a boss. Like, I can navigate on my own. I can make decisions on my own. But when things get uncertain, we need our leaders more than ever, and we need our teams more than ever. We're going to talk about the importance of building community when things feel very tenuous. Okay, let's look at what people are saying on chat. The first one really caught my eye. Madhuri says, you start shopping for pixie dust on Amazon. I love this. It's like, can I sprinkle some like lavender pixie dust in hopes that some sort of magic will happen, or maybe these things will go away, or maybe you start looking for like book of spells and curses so you can like ward off the evil spirits of uncertainty. What else are we seeing in there?
Yeah, Thea, you mentioned something that we're going to talk about, this idea of being honest that the situation's changing. You really want to size up the reality of the fact that there's a lot of unknowns. We'll double click on that. I really appreciate that comment.
Yeah, and I see Tia there is saying like being honest that the situation is changing. And so that's starting to move us into like, what can we do as leaders? And certainly being honest about the fact that the situation is changing. It's almost like, okay, we are now playing a different game. Like the rules and the ways we have been working don't necessarily apply anymore. Okay, we're going to start with some of the principles of leading through uncertainty. But I think what I want to start our conversation with is just this recognition that it requires a very different way of leading. And it's not necessarily a very different way of leading than the way that we have sort of advocated for years, like this multiplier way of leading. It's like multipliers plus plus. It takes some mindfulness even on top of this platform of leading. And maybe we can start our conversation by looking just at how much we need to change our frame and our approach as a leader. And I want to start us with an experience I had very early in my career. And Sean, I don't know that I've ever shared this one with you, but this was my first leadership training I went to, and I was the organizer of it. And I probably organized this workshop for all the other managers because I was desperate and needed to learn how to be a good leader. And I will never forget this webinar, or not a webinar, this workshop, because the facilitator, the leader of this workshop, he was saying like, your job as a leader is to extend the hand of greatness to your team and to tell them like, I see a better place and I will take you there. And then this is why I remember it, is because he like actually jumped up on the table at this point. We're 50 feet from Larry Ellison's office. And I'm thinking, okay, Larry's going to walk by. I think we've all gone nuts. But he jumps up on the table and he like leans way over like this. And he reaches out his hand, and he's a really big guy. And he's like reaching out this hand, and he says, as a leader, extend the hand of greatness and say, take my hand, come follow me. I will lead you to a better place. And I think this can't be what good leadership looks like. But in many ways, and I think, Sean, we've got a little picture of just kind of, I think that captures what it was like, is this, I have been to this better place and I will take you there, take my hand and follow me. And it made for like a compelling speech in some ways, but I want to start with maybe on chat. What are the fallacies behind that way of leading? I was pretty sure even back at the time, and this is probably in the 90s, that this was not a sound way
Do you
of
remember what you
leading.
were thinking? Like,
Well, I was thinking Larry's gonna come by.
Uh.
He's gonna think we've gone nuts. He's gonna look for the person in charge, which was me. And like, I was either gonna have to fire this guy or he was gonna fire me. Like, maybe that was a fleeting thought. But I just remember thinking that seems very melodramatic. It seems very egotistical.
yeah.
And I'm like, I don't have a hand of greatness to extend to anyone. Okay, what are the fallacies in this?
Okay, we've got, let's see, it assumes that the leader has certainty and control of the future. Thanks, Jerry, which, in times like now, we all know that's not true.
It's asking for blind loyalty.
Yeah.
It's dishonest. Yes, it's egotistical. It puts everything on the leader and it doesn't create learning opportunities for others.
Yeah, Sabrina mentions this idea that there's just a lack of clear curiosity in this. And so you could see a leader operating with this assurance that they just know what's going on, and then actually they kind of miss everything that's going on.
Right. And it's based on this assumption of a single brain. And I'm actually really grateful for this moment because I think it was starting to sow the seed for a different way of leading. Like, surely just having one big, smart, hand of greatness kind of leader isn't going to solve the real problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. And an assumption behind this way of leading is that the leader has been to this better place. Like, it's kind of like when we look at we go up a mountain and we go with a mountain guide who has been there, because the mountain doesn't really change. The mountain's been there for a long time. The terrain is probably the same. And so we rely on someone who's been to that place and they can guide us there. But it's so far from the reality we're dealing with. Most of us are leading our teams to places we've never been. Most organizations right now are trying to figure out their AI strategy. Okay, can we find a leader who's actually successfully built an AI strategy for their organization and they know how to do it and they know how to guide their teams there? More than extending the hand of greatness, I think what we need to do to really understand how we lead in uncertainty is to acknowledge that it's more like we're leading in the dark. We're feeling around in the dark. And we've got a little picture here. I think that captures this. Like, where we are asking our teams to go to a place that we've never been before. And we're not even sure is the right place. All we know is that we have to find a new path forward. And it's almost like, come follow me. We're doing this under the cover of darkness. Our lights are kind of dim, and let's figure this out together. And it's built on this assumption that no one person has all the answers, and we've got to find those answers together.
There was a comment someone said in chat that the leader believes they can essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, but they can stop emergence, which is a wild idea, that as a leader, you could just stop the unforeseen obstacle around the very next corner.
Right.
It's kind of a bizarre way to kind of lead a group through any map where the territory is constantly changing.
Right. And it reminds me back to kind of what was sort of in vogue 6 months ago around AI, which is like, okay, let's slow the development of AI so we can do this wisely. And it's like, maybe there are one or two people, but it's like, you can't slow that. It's like a tide that is coming. Okay, here's a question on chat. What does it feel like? What is it like when we are working in uncertainty? Because I think to lead well in this, we have to understand what this experience is like for the people we are leading. And what is it like for us? So feel free to put that in as well. What does working in uncertainty feel like? And go just, okay, let me see. Lorena says it's exhausting. It's like building a bridge and stopping in the middle. Wow, I feel like standing on a rickety edge, uncomfortable, chaos, exciting. you're feeling uncertainty about the safety of your job, kind of like I was when the guy was
Mm.
on the table, and I'm like, surely Larry Ellison is going to walk by in this moment and think we've lost our minds. Mental exhaustion. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it makes me think about when I'm in a position that I really don't, I know that I've got to do something and that it's important, but I really don't know what to do. The amount of emotional, the amount of anxiety and the intensity of that kind of acute experience, I'm just seeing this throughout that, throughout all these chats. It's this kind of like where it's like you know that you've got to jump out of the plane, but you're not too sure if you've got a pack on. And that kind of intensity is just runs through the thread.
Yeah. And Madhuri says it feels paralyzing. And as leaders, we feel very concerned for our team, which can end up leading us down the accidental diminisher path for certain, as we kind of err on the side of this hand of greatness leadership model of like, I'll protect you from all the scary things around the corners. It feels unproductive. It forces us to reframe. One last question before we dig into some of these principles. What is our natural inclination when we are working in uncertainty? What does our brains tell us to do? Not what do we then do, but like what is the lizard brain, the amygdala hijack? Like, what is our natural inclination when we are working in the dark? We can't see what's coming. We can't see if there's like an impact to what we're doing. We can't really see where things are going. Okay, what is the natural reaction? What are you saying, Sean?
Run, hide, panic, fight, flight, fight, try to create a structure, take control. My brain pushes me into the details as if more details will help me gain clarity. I get that I get way too far into it.
Oh, in some ways, it's like our natural inclination is to put our head down and just keep
Christy
working.
says, I just stay in bed. I just put the covers over your head.
Right. And like, and what we need is we need to be working eyes up, seeing what's going on. But our natural inclination is like, okay, I can solve this if I'm just more diligent.
Yeah, press on, fix it quick.
Mm-hmm.
Look at YouTube after some time. Yeah, no, there's
This is what's going on for people.
Yeah.
This is what's going on for people. Okay. So I guess there is one more question before we go into the principles of what we need. What do people need more of? When we are working in uncertainty, when we can't see what's going, when we get that sense of panic, fight or flight, what do people need more of when they are working in the dark? Okay, people need more support, care, collaboration, trust, grace, connection, empathy, communication, trust, dialogue, more permission, more guidance, more respect, empathy, more acknowledgement of their feelings, more community, more authenticity, vision, honesty, communication, kindness, more time to process. That's a really interesting one. I would have missed that one, that we do need more time to just process like what is going on around me.
And Perry, thanks for that. This idea that you got to focus on what you can control.
Great. These are awesome. Keep them coming. There are 5 things I think people need more of. A number of these have been referenced here. Like maybe first and foremost, people feel out of control in uncertainty. Like I can't put a lid on this. I can't get this done. I can't make a decision. And so people feel out of control. And what we can do as leaders is we can give people more control, which comes to our first practice. This is a practice we've talked about before. We're not going to go into it. This is give 51% of the vote. This is one of our tried and true multiplier practices. It's a way to say you have ownership of this. You have decision rights, like you are in control. Like even as a leader, when you feel out of control or you have maybe just a modicum of control, like give people maximum control. And that's like a first step to helping people navigate through uncertainty well. Okay, Andrew, thank you for that. We have got Andrew Webb from our team. He leads our content efforts, our product efforts. He'll be summarizing some of the things we see in chat. Give people 51% of the vote. Okay, I think people also need more safety. Now, we have talked often, Sean, about like fundamentally what good leaders do is they create this equilibrium between safety and stretch, sort of between comfort and challenge. And when we are operating in situations that are ambiguous and feel out of our control, like that inherently is more challenging. So that tips that balance toward challenge. So as leaders, we need to create more safety. Feel free to put in chat things that you can do to give people a greater sense of psychological safety, social safety, intellectual safety. One of the practices as leaders is to admit what you don't know, which you might think is actually going to create a sense of panic by like admitting what you don't know. But people feel like I'm in a situation, I don't quite know what I'm doing. And it's incredibly reassuring when the leader says, I don't quite know. I haven't been there either. We've got to figure this out together. Okay, Sean, you're already
So
on the
another
next
practice
one.
you can do is you can make space for mistakes. And this is a big deal because I know for me, when I'm feeling already uncertain about the situation, risk taking is kind of out. I'm going to stick to what I know. And so if you want to maintain any kind of edge and thinking, it's so helpful for the leader to slow down and say, hey, this area here, there's still a lot of play. Even though the world's kind of crumbling around us and we feel like there's a lot of fire, this area, we can still experiment here. You can lean into this with uncertainty, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's almost like saying you feel lots of danger in this environment, but here you are safe to play, to experiment, to make mistakes. This is where we can recover. This is like our fun space. And that will give people this greater measure of safety. Another thing people need more of is they need more information. When it's dark, you can't quite see like what you're doing. Is it landing? And people need a greater measure of performance intel. So this is a practice we've talked about before. It's like provide performance intel. This is, most of my charts, my pictures here are pretty ugly, Sean. This one might be the worst. This is a very pathetic attempt to draw a thermostat. And I love the metaphor of a thermostat in terms of giving people intel, information. It's not saying, gee, you've done something wrong. It's like, okay, that was like too far to the right. We've got to move to the left to hit the target. Okay, that's too far to the left. We've got to move to the right. And it works kind of like a thermostat works, which is you set it at 72. And if the room's too warm, you're like, okay, cool that down to hit the target. Okay, the room gets too cold. You're not making a values judgment on the person. You're just saying, okay, you need to warm that up. And the more we can get away from giving people personal feedback, which when you're dealing with uncertainty, like that hurts. But if you're giving people information to help them calibrate and figure out how to hit targets, like that is crucial for being able to navigate when things feel kind of dark. Okay, what else do people need? People, and we've seen this here. Saw at least 5 people say people need community. You are in a situation where I love that you're owning these as if you drew the ugly chart, Sean. It's like an act. It's a generous act.
I'm excited for you to explain what that is.
That
I just wanted to grab it before you could grab it, so I could have you make sure that
it's not a bad twist or bad. It was my attempt to show like connecting people together. Like we feel like uncertain. We feel alone when it's uncertain. That's why we kind of like want to get back in bed and pull the covers over our head. And it's connecting people to each other. It's like building connection among people, building a shared humanity. Like, how are you doing? And we're going to talk a little bit later about how you build collective intelligence. Okay, that was number 4. Lastly, what do people need greater measures of when they're dealing with uncertainty? They need greater measures of focus. Because it's like, I see all sorts of stuff going on. And we saw that in both of these challenges. Like, what should I be doing? Where should I be focusing my attention. And this is where we can, oh wait, I was wrong. Maybe this is the ugliest one.
It's awesome.
How bad is that? So this is something we talked about in our last episode together about defining the problem. And we showed that video clip from Apollo 13. You want to sum that up for us?
Yeah, so they get a problem from leadership. There's the astronauts are in big trouble up in space, and the leader gets the download of essentially what the problem is, and then immediately transforms that into a question. We got to figure out how to get this thing done. But that question then transfers to that team who goes into this room and says, okay, everybody, we've got this woman from upstairs. We've got to, essentially connect this piece and this piece and this bunch of garbage that they put on the table to be able to make this thing work so they don't run out of air, essentially.
Right. Yeah. How do we make this fit into the hole for that using nothing but this? And then that engineering manager doesn't solve the problem, just defines the problem. And that's what we can do as leaders when things are chaotic and uncertain, is create that focus by defining the problem, but then building that collective capability by not jumping in to solve it.
Yeah, and there's something that's really important about this for me because, well, first of all, I just want to admit that I've had very few leaders who do this well. When they get a problem from senior management or from a client, it's been my observation, and you can tell me if this is yours, that most of the leaders that I've worked for, they immediately kind of go into problem solving mode. They start to think about how they can fix it. This tends to be me. I've got to really think
Because
about this.
We feel this responsibility. Someone just put the monkey on our back. Someone just tasked us with solving it.
And so it leads to this problem where nobody can get on board. Whereas when the leader slows down and said, no, let's figure out what is the problem that we have to solve here. It's this natural kind of bus boarding, process where the bus fully stops, the doors open, and it's this waving motion to load people on the bus. And that happens as the problem takes definition. But now everybody's in on working through this. And we've just dropped the anxiety level or the frustration of being left behind down a bunch of notches.
That reminds me, of course, of Jim Collins' concept from Good to Great of like, get the right people on the bus, and then you'll figure out the right thing to do. And so it's a pause to help people load on. It also makes me, think about the something that came up in the multipliers research, and someone said that their leader, and it was a leader at Intel Corporation. If we have anyone from Intel, identify yourself, shout yourself out. But he said, yeah, he didn't speak. He didn't dominate the conversation. He spoke maybe 10% of the time in the meeting. I'm already feeling guilty. And he said, and most of what he would do is use that time to crisp up the problem statement and then turn it over to the team. Yeah.
Okay, so
look at this thing on chat. This is such a sweet thing, Liz. You're not a bad artist. You just need to embrace your unique aspect. I think he told me I was lame. Sabrina told me I was lame in such a sweet way. Thank you.
There's a nice restatement here, just like crisp up the problem statement. When somebody, there's a great service when a leader does that. Let's do it. Let's go back to challenge 1. Let me put it back up here and let's dive into this specific challenge and connect some practices to the situation that Crystal was in, where here we have this, organization that's going through pretty major changes. Centralization, particularly, is extremely unnerving because nobody knows what it's going to look like on the other side of centralization.
Well, other than, like your immediate needs are probably not going to be met well through a centralization process. Maybe your medium term and long term, but people go into a panic.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into this one. What are the practices that you can do when you're in a situation where your direct world, not the macro world, but your direct world is being turned upside down? Well, one of the things that you can do, I love this one, is you can define the learning agenda. What does this mean? Well, it's all of the things that what you want is you want a leader to articulate. Oh, I'll wave that around if I don't put that down, but actually we should admire your art for just a second.
This one's not as ugly as the other ones.
You you want to clarify for people what is known and what isn't known, because that what isn't known category is really what everybody's anxious about. And so if you can name that and like, let's list out all the things that we simply don't know about this situation. Now, all of a sudden you're engaging people in two things. One, if you tend to be a little bit of an optimist, you know that that what you're doing is you're trying to let people know that you're in tune with reality, and instead of leaning into your optimism, telling everything that it's going to be okay, we can do this, that's kind of more of that leaning across the table and let me lead you to this better place. But instead by being a realist, now all of a sudden people can trust that, well, you're not misseeing, you don't have an optics problem, you can see that there's things that we don't know, and now people can lean into contributing to the things that they're pretty sure that they don't know. You round a list out like that, it's going to give people a little bit more certainty.
John, this reminds me of, I was doing some research at a medical school. This is example about a medical school. And I was interviewing someone who was a resident there, and he was doing his rotation in emergency medicine. And he talked about this leader that he was working under and learning under. And it was this emergency physician. And this was at Stanford. And every time, I think about going into the Stanford ER, I think about this physician. Because what he said is, this doctor was such an amazing doctor and such an amazing teacher. He would take us to the outer edge of what we knew and then help us work the problem for there. So here's an emergency situation. People are coming in, it's chaotic, a lot of uncertainty. And he'd be like, okay, team, what do we know? Okay, we know vitals are this. We know this. We know we've got a wound here. We know this. We know breathing is compromised. And he would just very quickly go, what are all the things we know? And then he would say, what do we not know and need to find out? Okay, we need to get our, eyes on this. We need to get like maybe a fellow to come here on this. And this person said, I learned so much in that rotation. And I think that's what good leaders do, is like, okay, what do we know? What do we know? What do we don't know? And what do we collectively need to figure out? And sometimes figure out really, really fast, like in an emergency situation. Okay, here's another one. In these kinds of situations where there's a change afoot, we don't quite know what to tell people. We know there's a lot of uncertainty. How do I keep people calm even when I don't know how things are going to work? This is one for me that is like a burn from experience, is people need more information. They need more communication. We saw that in the chat. The practice would be like 2x your communication levels. I found that when we were doing similar changes, centralization, globalization kinds of changes at Oracle, I would hold back and wait. Like, oh, I don't want to put out an email or communicate until I really know what's going on. Tick, tick, tick. Time would go by. I would say nothing. That created more uncertainty. And what I wish I would have done better was to over communicate, even like, okay, we still don't know the answers to this, but we do know the answers to this. And these two practices couple pretty well, like, define the learning agenda and 2x the communication. This is also another situation where you can take out that impact player practice of opportunity goggles. Like, okay, we don't quite know how this is going to play out, but like, let's first look at it through the threat lens, and then let's look at it through, did you know how fast I went through that one? Because that one might be one of my uglies too.
I want to see it then. Like, let's double click on it if it's super ugly. Look at those goggles. They're suns almost.
They're like
shining,
sparkling. Maybe I did this in hopes that someone on here would be like a really talented graphic artist who would save me from myself. We actually have some wonderful, talented people that we work with that fix up all my bad stuff. But it's like, okay, how might this be an opportunity? And even amid the uncertainty, we can look for, well, if this happens, like, how does that become an opportunity for us to get this done? How is this an opportunity for us to partner with that group? So that's a practice that I think can help us there.
Let's do this. Let's pivot to practices that are specifically great for challenge 2. But before we do that, Andrew, is there anything in the chat that you're seeing that you just would like to comment on?
I think the very beginning, going back to the opportunity goggles, Liz, that you just mentioned, there was an overwhelming sense that when people are feeling this uncertainty, There was a desire to find the energy, the excitement, even the thrill of the unknown that people were trying because they knew there perhaps was a better way. There was a lot of comments there, and yet they're also facing what's this physiological response. There's angst and anxiety, and so they're grappling with these two. They know there's a better approach to leadership, but they also have this real angst about what they're dealing with, and they're grappling with those two dynamics.
Mhm.
Okay.
Multiple
Okay.
people tried that.
Thank you, Andrew. I've got a pop quiz for my optimist friend. As someone who's got optimist tendencies, when your team is struggling with a lot of uncertainty, which lens do you put on first? Opportunity lens or threat lens?
Me?
This is the quiz for you.
Oh, can I?
I'm looking at you with a slight disapproving face if you get this wrong. I'm just gonna.
Okay, so if I'm in a situation of uncertainty, do you go opportunity first or threat first?
Mhm.
Well, I'd say threat first. Let's tease out how bad this could be, and then ask the question, where's the opportunity? Is
Yes.
that the poop in the pony? Is that's the poop in the pony thing, right?
Sean, you've got this wrong.
I'm just-
It's not the poop in the pony.
Oh, the pony in the poop, right? There's my dyslexia coming through. Goodness gracious.
It's finding that's from this kind of like classic little tale of a young girl who opens a box of poop. It's like, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. That's the opportunity lens. Sean, we can't take you anywhere. No, but it's like with someone with optimist tendencies like I have, and we know it's accidentally diminishing, we want to, like, when people are having that reaction to uncertainty, we want to be like, it's going to be okay. Like, this is going to be great. There's opportunity for us in there. But like when we stop and acknowledge the threat and dwell a little bit in that moment, it's then easier for people to say, okay, now let's look for the opportunity. Let's look for the pony in the poop.
Not the poop in the pony.
Not the poop in the pony. Okay.
Okay,
Challenge 2.
challenge 2. Here it is. So we've got macro foundational things that are moving around us, way outside of our control. Thank you, Rob, for submitting this to us. What are some practices that we can do to prepare for managing? How do we manage like risks that we know we don't control?
Well, this is one where it feels like a movie scene to me, where we see these big macro forces beyond our control, and we just don't know which way, like the winds are blowing, the ground is moving. And I always get this image of like one of these apocalyptic kind of movies where something terrible has happened. There's usually like a hero in these movies. It's usually like The Rock or, one of these kind of characters. And it's like they're waking people up in the middle of night and saying like, okay, we've got to move out. We're like, and they're leading their team out into the darkness, and they don't know where they're going. They don't know which way the wind is blowing, but they've got to figure it out together. And I think your job as a leader is, once you've taken people like out of the comfort of their homes and their cozy beds, so to speak, and say, we have to go out and move into the darkness and find a new path. Like, you've got to build collective intel. And of course, then I think of these like movies that are like special ops, special forces, where like a special ops team has to go under the cover of darkness. They're all like greased up and they've dropped in. That, like, the leader's role in that is, one, to establish the focus, the commander's intent, but the leader's role is to get people talking. Like, they're on radio, and in these situations, you see people talking to each other. Okay, I've got eyes on this. I see this. Okay, we have a problem at 11 o'clock. Okay, the gate is actually locked. We're going to have to go to plan B on this. And what the teams do is, like, no one person can see everything, but they have to build this collective intel. Here's a simple little practice. We've just started doing this as a team. I call it trend spotting. And when like the environment is changing, you don't know where things are going. We starting our calls by just asking the question, what are you seeing? What are you seeing out there? And so we might look at like, the corporate world and, you know, trends in the workplace, and everyone, we open up a Google Doc, some sort of shared doc, and we just start jamming in, okay, I'm seeing this. And sometimes people are citing sources. Lauren is always citing sources, of course, in this, you know, or we drop in links to some of the data that we're seeing, but it's just like, what are you seeing? And we start to build this collective view of what's going on. Everyone feels a little bit smarter. And I think people feel a greater degree of comfort that, like, okay, I can see more than I can see on my own. So build collective intel.
Another thing that you can do, and I really have appreciated the leaders that have done this for me, is they just go immediately into scenario planning, where you can say, okay, here are possible responses that we could have to this. We could do A, we could do B, we could do C. And oftentimes they're using the same model, which is what are our options? And they're doing that collective leading to extract out of people, well, what are the ways that we could respond to this type of scenario? So then now you're sitting there in this with your leader and with the team, and you're looking at a range of possibilities. And I think that kind of gives life back in the situation. Whereas when you're not aware that there are a range of possibilities, well, then you can feel quite controlled by the situation. When you realize that there is a range of possibilities, now all of a sudden you get the sense that there are a few things you can control.
Yes. And this isn't a practice that, we invented. This is a practice that executive teams and strategy departments in big corporations use all the time. I remember having a conversation with a CEO of a very big retail organization in the US. And it was just on the eve of some of the election. And, I asked, like, how are you? And like, and I remember just seeing this calm, and we talked about like what the team had been doing to do scenario planning. Like, well, okay, if this happens, then we're going to do this, and if that happens, we'll do this. And they had laid out all these scenarios. Of course, they don't know how this is all going to turn out, and they don't know which scenario they're going to be left with, or even a totally different scenario. Kind of like Austin mentioned, he had plan A, plan B, and what did he get? Plan C. But the fact that the team has done that thinking and built some collective wisdom around that, then when the eventuality appears, it emerges, you can't stop it, then you're like, we've done the thinking and we are ready to go. And you can do this on such a simple level with your team. Okay, like, what do we do in this situation, that situation? You're building strategic thinking muscle as you're going.
Yeah. Another practice that you can do, especially as we've got these macro changes that are occurring around us, is a lot of times we'll be in a scenario where maybe it's maybe we're into annual planning or semi-annual planning, and you have these big targets that are a little further out. Well, sometimes in these scenarios, what people really need is for us to bring the target up a little closer. Maybe having a year goal stretches way beyond what any of us can feel confident is a target that we can reach. And so if you bring the target up a little bit closer, somewhere to the range where people feel like, oh, we can hit that target, that's something we can focus on without having to take on so many variables. It believes that we start to believe that we can actually hit the target and get to the destination.
Yeah, and it starts to build that momentum in that cycle of success that we have talked about in other episodes. This reminds me of some research that I did for the book Rookie Smarts. And, of course, we know that like people tend to thrive on challenge, but when the challenge is too big, people either let go or it breaks them. And we found that when people are new to something, like someone's new to a job, new to an organization, that the ideal size package on a challenge is 2 weeks, about 2 weeks. And it's like some assignment that someone can take on that it's more than a couple days. They don't have to keep reporting back to the boss, feeling sort of, humiliated by not having some leash, but they're not left to just wander. So 2 weeks is a really good size challenge for someone who's new to a role, a job, an assignment. But in times of uncertainty, we're all new. Like everything feels foreign and new. So like bringing the targets closer, you might think in terms of like, what's a 2-week bite?
Yeah. There was a leader that I remember working for. He was an engineering leader named Stefan. And we were doing this big technical project, and there were many stakeholders at different levels for both our client and for the technology partners we were working for. And the thing was just unraveling. And he would say all the time, we would talk about, okay, what's the goals? What are the milestones we need to hit? And I remember he'd raise his hand and be like, oh, it's too far. Oh, too much. And
Interesting.
it was just his way of kind of, and he was the leader, and he was really good at creating a massive amount of space. He was very restrained. He wasn't this kind of assertive leader that was kind of opening the meetings with a big start and closing with a booming close. He pretty much gave, I'd say, 95% of the real estate to everyone in the room. But whenever he sensed that the targets were too far, that was his little move, and it helped people realize, oh, maybe we don't need to go out that far. Let's define something that's a little bit more local.
Yeah. And, we've talked about this in previous episodes, like self-knowledge around, do you as a leader tend to be an overstretcher or an understretcher? Overstretchers like give people things that are, ridiculously hard and hope they rise to the occasion. I tend to be an overstretcher, or an understretcher, which is like a little bit more on the safety side. Like, let me give you something doable. This is where that self-knowledge really comes in handy. Like, where do you tend to err? And how do you maybe swing the other direction?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are so close to hitting all 13 practices. We've got 2 more. We've also, I would love to see people share their insights on, given these 2 situations, what do you see that people could do when they're in this situation or a like situation? What have you been the recipient of, like great leadership, or when you had a great leadership moment, what does it look like in these situations? We've got a couple more here. This one, particularly poor graphic, but let me see if I can do a decent job explaining it. It's called Call Out the Impact. And the idea is that when, things are uncertain and it's dark, not only can we not see quite where we're going, sometimes it's hard to see the effect of what we've done. Like, I'm doing things, I'm like shooting off arrows in the dark, but I can't see, are they landing? And we find this is particularly acute right now as more and more people are working remote. It's like we turn in our work, we do something, and then we move on, and we don't quite know where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for leaders to help restore like this cycle of causality,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, you did something and something good happened because of it. Like, you did this thing and then somebody else was able to do that thing. It benefited our customers. Andrew has this wonderful term for this. Andrew and I were talking about this, and he refers to this as because of you. Like, because of this thing you did, Sean, like the team was able to do this, because you like went through that analysis and highlighted all the key observations. Like, I didn't have to work this weekend. Like, I was able to go to my kids' game because you had kind of highlighted all the key findings in that report. Like, often you hear so many people say that like people want meaning, deep meaning in their work. I like to think of that as like all caps meaning, like giving people meaning. Well, sometimes, we're not doing work that has massive, intergalactic kind of meaning. We're saving the planet, we're saving humanity. Sometimes we're just doing some analysis and turning in reports. We may not be able to give people like all caps meaning, but we can do what I kind of call lowercase meaning, meaning this is what your work means to your colleague, what it means to me, what it means to our customer. Like, a good thing happened because of you and your work.
You know what's fun about that, Andrew? By the way, I love that. This idea of because is such a big deal. We know in research that if you give anybody bad news and it carries a because, they take it better. So if you give people bad news and you don't tell them it was because of X or Y, it falls much harder. Whereas if you give somebody bad news and say, well, the reason why this occurred is because the reception,
explaining the why.
And what's interesting about this one is this because is such a powerful thing. It's I think it's the all caps meaning. I think that's what people spend most of their time worrying about.
Yeah.
Like, not, does this job capture my my inner identity and the
My
values that I have
passions.
and my passions. I think more often we're just wondering, and I wonder if I'm making a difference around here.
You know,
And when,
Sean, just
go
as
ahead.
a thought, when that came out, when a team leader recognized we were in this moment of uncertainty, the haze of uncertainty, and there's a team meeting, and it was so simple. The leader simply said, and I'll tell you, engagement was low. The team members were feeling it, they were down. And he mentioned, just because of you and the work you did on the data, that's simple. Our team now has a reputation for being the go-to team.
Mhm.
The impact on that statement alone, the way they responded and walked out of that meeting, they were different people.
Totally.
Just
Yeah.
that simple.
Well, so I think it's what all of us spend most of our time worried about. Like, am I making much of a difference around here? Because of you, you made this difference. Oh, it's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I just looked at the Gallup workplace study, and if you're going to do some trend spotting, that's a good place to start. And it was one of the biggest barriers right now for people being engaged is that like I'm feeling a lack of meaning, like I need greater meaning in my work. And yes, we may not be able to give people all caps, big meaning, but we can help people see what their work means to other people. Like just because of this, like our team has the reputation of being like the go-to people. That's amazing. That's amazing. You know what else is amazing? Denise is amazing because Denise has listed out some of the takeaways from this.
Thank you, Denise.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that she shared that, got a link to more. Yeah, Andrew says impact play, Denise. We are down to, I think that was our final. I think we got to all
Bam.
13. Bam. Boom. Okay.
And we got a listexic joke with the poop before the pony and said, we need the pony, then the poop. I'll never forget it. Hey, listen, this has been fantastic. We benefit so much from your contributions in this community. We really appreciate your inputs deeply. I'm just going to mention a little practice that if you'd like, we'll go ahead and send it out to everyone that attended. There's a thing that we've been doing connected to impact players that has just really been brilliant for teams when you're in an uncertain place. And we call it the pressures and permissions conversation. And what it is we've got these cards. What we did is we went and asked people what were the common things, the pressures that people felt that held them back from stepping up and playing bigger. This idea of impact players.
Sean, who made the graphics on those cards?
And they're good. You'll see. So here's I just want to for your attendance.
Graphic love on
No,
that. Like
really
Sabrina
good.
made me feel good.
They're really good. And so, but here's what you do. So we'll send out a little exercise that for everybody that attended today. But here's what it is. The idea of the cards is you help people identify what are the pressures that they're feeling, like to stay in their lane or to finish everything that they've started or to act like things aren't hard. Everybody gets a chance to look through these cards and to play a card and say, here are the pressures that I feel that are holding me back from stepping up and playing bigger. And what it does is it gives people the ability to articulate the things that they're unsure about. And everybody identifies that we're all feeling this way. I just did this with some senior executives at a semiconductor company. And these were very, very seasoned professionals at the highest level of this worldwide organization. And all of them were so quick to pick up a card. Oh, I feel this. I feel pressure to hold back because of this or that. And what it does is it creates a conversation where you can get these pressures that we feel out in the open. And then as a leader, you can ask, okay, well, then what would you need? What permission would you need to step up and play bigger? It's a very simple conversation that you can have. And if you want to stoke impact player behaviors in times of uncertainty, in addition to these, which we'll, of course, be sharing out, you can use this pressure and permissions conversation to give people the ability to first know that you recognize that there are pressures that hold people back, but then through permission, invite them to step up and play bigger.
Okay, I have two because of yous. Denise, because of you and what you chatted in, people have a quick takeaway. They don't only have to wait for us to send out a summary. And for everyone who has contributed on chat, because of you, people can learn from a broader learning community around leadership. And they're not just stuck with me and Sean and Andrew and Austin, like, thank you so much for helping us all learn and learn collectively and deal with the hard matters of leadership.
Thanks, everybody. Next episode will be part 2 of Leading in Uncertain Times. We really look forward to seeing you there. Have a fantastic month until next time.